Metro City bustles under the weight of its own contradictions. A city of bright lights and dark alleys, where justice is often determined not by truth, but by perception. On an ordinary evening, Malcolm Hayes finds himself on the wrong side of that perception. Well-dressed, composed, and minding his own business, Malcolm is stopped by two detectives, Ryan Carter and Jake Nelson. Their eyes don't see a man of status, a man of dignity. Instead, they see what their biases have trained them to expect. The questions start sharp and accusatory. Where are you headed? Do you have ID? What's in your pockets? Malcolm remains calm, knowing all too well the weight of this moment. But as his patience holds, their assumptions tighten around him like a noose. Then, the inevitable happens. The cold steel of handcuffs bites at his wrists as he is shoved into the back of a squad car. No warrant, no probable cause. Just two men acting on prejudice disguised as law enforcement. At the station, the mood is casual. Another suspect, another meaningless report. But when the officers finally run Malcolm's name through the system, everything shifts. The silence that follows is suffocating. Eyes widen, stomachs drop. The realization settles like a heavy stone in the gut. Malcolm Hayes isn't just another man off the street. He is someone far beyond their assumptions. Someone whose very existence shatters their narrative. Who is Malcolm Hayes, and why does his true identity leave the entire police station in disbelief? What happens next is not just a revelation, it's a reckoning. The arrest. The morning air in Metro City is crisp, the kind of peaceful start to a day that suggests nothing could go wrong. Malcolm Hayes, a man of quiet confidence and careful composure, steps out of the cafe where he just had breakfast, slipping his keys from his pocket as he approaches his car. That's when he hears it. "Sir, stop right there." The voices are sharp, commanding, and laced with an authority that doesn't ask. It demands. Detectives Ryan Carter and Jake Nelson stand just feet away, hands resting near their holsters. Their eyes don't see Malcolm for who he is. They don't see his crisp suit, his measured demeanor, or the steady way he carries himself. They see something else. Someone else. ID, now. The demand is immediate, void of explanation. Malcolm meets their gaze with quiet steadiness. "Is there a problem, officers?" His voice is level, but experience tells him that reason will not be an ally today. "You match a suspect's description." The words feel rehearsed, like a script they've used before. A vague accusation, just enough to justify suspicion, but too hollow to hold weight. Malcolm exhales slowly and retrieves his wallet, offering them his identification without argument. He knows the rules. Stay calm, stay cooperative, don't escalate. But compliance doesn't matter when guilt is assumed. Carter's eyes flick over the ID for barely a second before he shoves it into his pocket, uninterested. "Turn around, hands behind your back." A beat of silence. Malcolm blinks. "Excuse me?" "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Nelson snaps. A spark of something dangerous ignites in Malcolm's chest, but he tamps it down. He raises his hands slowly, carefully, not wanting to give them any reason. "I haven't done anything wrong." "You're resisting," Carter declares, stepping closer. The lie is spoken so effortlessly, so instinctively, that it chills Malcolm to his core. A moment later, hands seize his arms, twisting them roughly behind his back. He grits his teeth as the cold metal of the cuffs bites into his skin. Bystanders stop. A young couple whispers to each other, their phones raised, recording. An elderly woman nearby shakes her head in silent disapproval. The city doesn't pause for injustice, but its people bear witness. The officers shove Malcolm toward the squad car, their grip firm, their faces unreadable. The moment he disappears inside, the videos begin to spread. The outrage is instant. The police station and the big reveal. Inside the Metro City Police Station, the air is thick with routine indifference. Officers shuffle paperwork, phones ring in the background, and the fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Malcolm Hayes sits in a holding cell, his suit slightly wrinkled from the rough handling, but his expression unchanged. Calm, patient, waiting. At the front desk, detectives Ryan Carter and Jake Nelson move through the booking process with practiced efficiency, their confidence unwavering. To them, this is just another routine arrest. Then, Officer Daniel Reese walks in. Reese is new to the department, fresh-faced, eager, and still unjaded by the culture around him. As he scans through the paperwork, something stops him cold. His eyes flick back to the holding cell, then down to the arrest report. His pulse quickens. No, it can't be. He turns sharply to Carter and Nelson, lowering his voice. Do you even know who that is? Nelson scoffs. Some guy who got too mouthy. Why? Reese swallows hard. That's Malcolm Hayes. A pause. The name hangs in the air. And? Carter asks, still unfazed. Reese leans in, his voice firm. Malcolm Hayes, the civil rights attorney, the one who's made a career out of exposing cops like you. Silence. Carter's smirk vanishes. Nelson's face drains of color. Reese continues, his tone laced with warning. He's handled some of the biggest police misconduct cases in the state. He's taken down departments twice the size of ours, and now you've wrongfully arrested him. Before the weight of that sinks in, another voice cuts through the room. What's going on here? Lieutenant Sarah Thompson steps forward. She's new to the precinct, but already known for her no-nonsense approach. Her sharp gaze lands on the two detectives. What are the charges? Nelson clears his throat. He matched a suspect's description. Thompson crosses her arms. You mean the man who was having breakfast? The one witnesses say complied with everything you asked? Neither detective answers. Reese steps closer. Lieutenant, he's telling the truth. That man is Malcolm Hayes. A heavy silence falls over the room. Somewhere outside, the first sound of chanting rises. Justice for Malcolm Hayes. Thompson glances toward the front doors, where a growing crowd of protesters gathers, their voices getting louder. Phones are out, cameras rolling. The city is watching. Thompson turns back to Carter and Nelson, her expression unreadable. You two better start talking. Fast. The tension is suffocating. The weight of their mistake is beginning to settle. But the real reckoning? It's just getting started. Would you have handled the situation differently if you were in Lieutenant Thompson's position? How do you think the police department will respond now that the truth is out? Have federal involvement and department scandal. Inside the Metro City Police Station, the air is electric with tension. The station, once filled with routine chatter and half-hearted paperwork, has transformed into the epicenter of a brewing storm. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson knows something doesn't add up. She spent years navigating the gray areas of law enforcement, but this case, this arrest, feels wrong on every level. As she digs through records, searching for any reason why Malcolm Hayes was stopped, a disturbing truth begins to emerge. Malcolm wasn't just any high-profile civil rights attorney. He was working undercover. Buried in classified files, Thompson uncovers the shocking revelation. Malcolm Hayes has been collaborating with the federal government in a sweeping operation to expose systemic police corruption within Metro City's law enforcement. His arrest wasn't just wrongful. It was a catastrophic mistake that could bring the entire department crashing down. The realization hits like a freight train. If Malcolm Hayes was arrested under false pretenses, what does that say about the officers who did it? Thompson rushes to Police Chief Robert Daniels' office, bursting through the door. Daniels, a seasoned but politically wary man, barely looks up from his desk. Chief, we have a problem, Thompson states, her voice sharp. Daniels sighs. What now? She drops the file onto his desk. Malcolm Hayes isn't just a lawyer. He's been working with the feds to expose police corruption in the city. Daniels freezes, his fingers tightening around the folder before flipping through its pages. The weight of the revelation sets in. If this goes public, it won't just be a scandal. It will be the end of his career, the end of the department as he knows it. Before he can respond, a commotion erupts in the lobby. The glass doors swing open, and FBI agent Marcus Wright strides in, his badge flashing, his presence commanding. The room falls silent. Officers shift uncomfortably as Wright scans the crowd, his gaze finally settling on Chief Daniels. Release Malcolm Hayes. Immediately. Daniels stands, his authority challenged. Agent Wright, I'm not sure you. Now. Wright's voice is steel. He steps forward, lowering his voice just enough to send a chill through the room. Malcolm Hayes is a federal asset. Your officers just arrested a man working on a classified investigation into police misconduct. Do you understand what that means? Carter and Nelson, standing off to the side, suddenly look like men who realize they just destroyed their own careers. Wright turns to Lieutenant Thompson. Lieutenant, I assume you still have integrity left in this department. Take care of this. Thompson nods without hesitation. Within moments, Malcolm is escorted from his holding cell, the handcuffs removed as if they never should have been there in the first place. He straightens his suit, glancing briefly at the officers around him. He doesn't need to say anything. His very presence is enough to remind them of the mistake they made. Outside, the crowd erupts as Malcolm steps out, free once again. But the fight isn't over. The FBI isn't just demanding his release. They want a formal public apology from the Metro City Police Department. And more importantly, they want answers. This is no longer just about Malcolm Hayes. This is about systemic corruption, abuse of power, and a reckoning that is long overdue. Now the question remains, how deep does the corruption go? And how many officers will fall when the truth finally comes to light? The public apology and fallout. The weight of failure hangs heavy over the Metro City Police Department. The world is watching. The media's cameras rolling as Chief Robert Daniels steps up to the podium, flanked by city officials and a visibly uncomfortable lineup of senior officers. The tension is palpable. Protesters fill the streets outside the station, their voices unified in chants demanding justice. Daniels clears his throat and adjusts the microphone. He knows this moment is not just about damage control, it's about survival, his survival. Good afternoon, he begins, his voice tight. I stand before you today to acknowledge a grave mistake made by this department. The wrongful arrest of Mr. Malcolm Hayes was an unacceptable failure on our part. Our officers acted in error, and for that, we take full responsibility. There's no sign of approval from the crowd, only silence, heavy waiting. Daniels exhales, his grip tightening on the podium. Effective immediately, Detectives Ryan Carter and Jake Nelson have been placed on indefinite suspension pending further investigation. A murmur ripples through the audience. Suspensions. Suspensions. Not terminations. Not justice. Daniels continues, but his words already feel empty. He knows this won't be enough. Then Malcolm Hayes steps forward. Unlike Daniels, he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't fumble for words. His voice is steady, his presence commanding. I appreciate the apology, Malcolm begins, but let's be clear. Apologies mean nothing without action. A wave of agreement ripples through the crowd. The cameras zoom in. This isn't just about me. This is about a system that allows officers to profile, harass, and arrest people based on nothing more than prejudice. A system where accountability is rare and justice is selective. That ends now. Cheers erupt, fists raised in solidarity. Malcolm turns to Daniels, holding his gaze. I don't want words. I want change. We all do. The energy in the air shifts. This moment isn't just about righting a single wrong. It's the catalyst for something bigger. Across the city, community-led initiatives begin to form. Activists, attorneys, and citizens rally together demanding reforms. Mandatory body cameras to ensure transparency in every encounter. Civilian oversight committees with the power to review cases of misconduct. Stricter disciplinary action for officers who abuse their authority. The movement gains momentum, sparking national conversations about racial profiling, police accountability, and the deep-rooted failures of the justice system. Meanwhile, inside the police department, a different storm brews. Officers whisper in hushed tones, "Who else is being investigated? Who else will be exposed?" The FBI's presence lingers like a shadow, and no one knows just how far the corruption runs. This is just the beginning. The system has been exposed. Now the question is, will it finally be forced to change? What do you think? Should officers Carter and Nelson have been fired instead of suspended? How can communities hold law enforcement accountable beyond just protests? Long-term change and hope for the future. 6 months have passed since the day Malcolm Hayes stood on the steps of the Metro City Police Department demanding real change. In that time, the city has undergone a transformation, not just in policy, but in mindset. Reform isn't just an idea anymore, it's happening. A legal aid clinic now operates in the heart of the city, offering free legal representation for individuals who have been wrongfully arrested. No one should have to face the system alone, especially when that system is flawed. A community oversight board has been established, made up of civilians, activists, and legal experts. They have the power to review complaints, investigate misconduct, and hold officers accountable, a safeguard that never existed before. Mandatory police training now includes de-escalation techniques and racial sensitivity education, ensuring that officers are better equipped to handle situations with understanding, not aggression. For Malcolm, the fight didn't end with his release. It only strengthened his resolve. He has spent these months working tirelessly, collaborating with activists, attorneys, and reform advocates to ensure these changes aren't just symbolic gestures, but real, lasting progress. And then, in a moment no one could have predicted, Malcolm receives an invitation. Not from a news outlet, not from a protest group, from the police academy. They want him to train new recruits. The same institution that once failed him now asks him to teach the next generation of officers about justice, integrity, and respect for all citizens. Standing in front of a room full of young cadets, Malcolm knows that change doesn't come overnight. But as he looks into their faces, some hopeful, some uncertain, he realizes something important. Justice is a long journey, but every step forward matters. The road ahead won't be easy. There will always be obstacles. But today, Metro City stands as proof that accountability, reform, and progress are possible. What do you think? Which of these reforms do you believe is the most important? How can communities continue to push for long-term change? The message of this story. This video sheds light on the harsh realities of racial profiling, police brutality, and systemic injustice, issues that continue to plague society despite years of advocacy and awareness. Malcolm Hayes' story is not just fiction. It reflects the lived experiences of countless individuals who have been wrongfully targeted due to bias and institutional failures. But beyond the injustice, this story also highlights something just as powerful: resilience. Malcolm Hayes never allowed injustice to define him. Instead of giving in to anger or despair, he used his knowledge, influence, and determination to create meaningful change. His story proves that no matter the obstacles, persistence can lead to progress. Community action. The voices of bystanders, the recordings, the protests, they mattered. The public refused to let injustice go unnoticed. This serves as a reminder that when communities unite and demand accountability, change becomes possible. Legal advocacy. Real justice is more than apologies, it's about reform for it. Malcolm understood that fighting within the system is just as important as resisting it. His push for legal aid clinics, oversight boards, and police training proves that the law, when wielded correctly, can be a tool for justice rather than oppression. The key message is clear. Justice isn't just about individual accountability, it's about systemic change. It's not enough to remove a few bad officers. The entire system must be reformed to ensure fairness, integrity, and true equality under the law. A call to action. This isn't just a story, it's a wake-up call, a challenge to speak up, stand up, and push for policies that protect rather than oppress. So we ask you, what can we do as individuals to help create a more just society? How do we ensure that justice isn't just a word, but a reality for all?